We are happy to announce that this webinar attendance is completely full, so thank you for taking the time to join us. Just a heads up, we will be recording this webinar and sending it out to every single person who has joined us today or signed up for the webinar as soon as it is ready. It will normally take about 2 to 3 days. I also wanted to do a quick announcement that our 2023 End User Forum in person will be taking place officially next week, March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, which is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We already have over 41 attendees, so we are super excited. If you are still interested, we do have a couple spots that are available, so we have extended, as we have extended the room capacity, so please contact us if you are interested or have any questions. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the webinar hosts for today, Dr. Elliott and Dr. Shabana Verki.
Thank you, Grace, and welcome everybody. As Grace had mentioned, my colleague Soha and I are going to introduce you to our latest instrument that we launched just this past month, January 2023. And just quickly, let's go ahead and have a quick overview of how the talk or how our webinar will go today. So for anyone who is entirely new to RioSense, we always like to share our proprietary technology, which is at the core or in the core of all of our instruments, and that's the m-VROC technology. And then we want to move into the specifications on our next generation m-VROC 2, so that you can see all the advancements and new features that it has over our old instrumentation. And then Soha will give you a guided tour of the m-VROC so that you can see it in person, live. And then finally, we'll share some sample data that we've been able to collect on our latest instrument. So let's start with m-VROC technology. So m-VROC stands for Viscometer Rheometer on a Chip. And this technology is essentially a microfluidic flow channel and with pressure sensors spaced along the base of the channel. So it's a combination of microfluidics and MEMS, microelectromechanical sensors. And the way we use this to determine the viscosity is that we are controlling the flow rate through this flow channel. And that allows us, along with the geometry of the channel, so specifically the width and the depth, to calculate the shear rate. And as I mentioned, we have the sensors spaced along the base of the flow channel. So we have the pressure gradient along the flow channel, which again, in combination with the geometry, with the geometry of the channel, we can calculate the shear stress. So as you know, steady shear viscosity is the proportionality between the shear stress and shear rate. So that's how our technology works. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the core of all of our instrumentation, including our latest m-VROC 2. So let me also just point out for anyone who's new to us, we do have different channels available depending on your needs. And the channels will vary both in terms of channel depth. So you can get anything between a 20 micron and a 300 micron channel depth, depending on what your needs are in terms of either particle size or flow rate range, or I'm sorry, shear rate range, theoretical shear rate range that you might need. And then we also have, very sensitive keypad here, we also have different sensitivities for the pressure. So we have something as low as about 10 or 12 kilopascals up to 1700 or 1800 kilopascals, depending on your needs, again, with the viscosity of your samples and what kind of rates you want to work with. So now let's jump into the new features on our m-VROC 2 and how they compare to the previous generation of this instrument. So one of the main benefits is that we've been able to minimize the sample volume that we need while still expanding the operating range of the instrument. So in the old days, we needed at least 50 microliters of sample and sometimes up to 10,000 to get to the higher rates. But now we can operate between a minimum of 15 microliters and a max of 2,500 microliters. And we can do this while still expanding our operation range. So now we've increased the max flow rate to either 30,000 or 60,000 microliters per minute, depending on which pump you choose. So just like the old instrument, we have 2 pump options, either the normal or the fast pump, or 1 times or 2 times pump, depending how it's referred to. And then this gives us an increased maximum shear rate that we can access. Now we can be in excess of 2 million, as opposed to in the past where it was 1.4 million, where it maxed out. Viscosity range has increased a bit as well, although I will say that this is somewhat conservative because internally we have measured things on the m-VROC 1 that were in excess of the 100,000. So this is sort of a conservative range for you and the viscosity. There have been some changes also to temperature control. Although the range is the same, it's still 4 to 70 degrees C for our standard instrument, although we do have a high temperature system that goes higher, but for our standard instrument, it still remains 4 to 70 degrees C. However, there has been a change in the temperature control, whereas previously it was a circulating fluid bath, now it's Peltier temperature control, which is much faster and much more stable. And then of course we have the instrument alone, we don't have that circulating bath that comes with it. One of the other great features of this instrument that's been introduced is now we have a sample reservoir. So if you're familiar with our automated initium, it's a similar idea. We have this reservoir so that we can do what we refer to as sample retrieval and sample recovery. And so we'll go into some more detail on that when we have sort of a bird's eye view of the instrument, and I'll explain more what that means. But in general, what it's going to allow you to do is once you've introduced sample into the test syringe, you can retrieve it and retest with it, and then ultimately you can recover that sample when testing is complete. This was not available on our previous m-VROC 1. The barcode reader is also an option on our instrument, so if you do use that to keep track of your samples, you can scan sample labels into the instrument, and then this will be transferred to the software so that sample name and any information related to it can be automatically transferred into the software. Also, the chip cleaning station, which is pictured below the m-VROC 2, is now included automatically in your purchase of m-VROC 2 as opposed to in the past where it was optional. And one of the reasons is that now the software, you can actually create custom cleaning protocols in the more advanced software that can be communicated to the chip cleaning station. So there's a lot more pre-programmed cleaning protocols that you can make for your samples using up to 3 solvents, and then these protocols can be transferred to the chip cleaning station. And we'll talk a little bit more about how the test syringe and the reservoir can be connected to fully clean out that system. The other benefit of the software, other benefits actually, one, in the past you had the option of getting a 21 CFR Part 11 compliant version of the software. Now there's only one version and it is compliant with that 21 CFR. The other benefit is in the old software, if you remember some of our old users, you had to guess what the viscosity of your sample was, and then the software would give you an estimated range of rates that you could operate in. So that is no longer necessary. You can work in what we refer to as a fully automatic mode, where you just tell the instrument, I don't know anything about my sample. Please go in and figure out a rate that it can operate at. So that's another benefit. You no longer have to go through that guessing process and be concerned that maybe it's not the best estimate. Okay, so now let's take a quick bird's eye view of the instrument here. Oops. So now we're looking down on top with, say, as if the cover were opened. And so what we can see are the test syringe, the chip, which is right here. And so the chip is essentially the housing that contains that microfluidic channel that I just described, and any sort of electronic components that are necessary. And then this piece right here is what we're referring to as the reservoir. So in the past with the m-VROC 1, there was no reservoir, there was just an exit stream from the chip that went directly to the waste. But now, once you've introduced the fluid into your test syringe, which you will do manually, and connect everything, now we have the ability to, just like we do with our automated initium, to back pressure, reverse the flow, and then refill the test syringe so that you can then continue testing with that single loaded volume. So this is how we can get a lot more data with a lot less volume. And now it's an entirely closed system here as well. So now what I'm going to do is pass this on to my colleague Soha, and she is going to do an actual live demo for you so you can actually see the unit and see the parts. So if you give me a moment here. I will stop sharing our presentation so that you can focus on the webcam. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. Now that Stacy provided a quick overview of the introduction of the technology and also the specifications of our new product, I'm going to go over the actual instrument and showing you the main components and main parts of this instrument that you will need to run your experiment. So the first component that I'm going to introduce you is the chip. As you might be familiar with our technology, here is the m-VROC chip that we use for our measurements. The microfluidic channel and pressure sensors are embedded within this housing. There's inlet and outlet on this chip, and as Stacy mentioned, we have a new part here, which is called reservoir. So this reservoir is used to allow you to retrieve your sample during the measurements. So you will be able to do many more measurements with one loaded sample volume. And also at the end of the experiments, you are able to recover the sample into the test syringe, and in case you need your sample for further characterization, you can use the sample for further purposes. So here is the reservoir, and we can easily connect the reservoir to the chip. Here is the outlet of the chip and inlet of the reservoir. If you open the latch, we can easily install a chip to the reservoir and close the latch. So you see that we have very tight connection here. And the third component would be the test syringe. We have two options for the test syringe. Here I have 100 microliter test syringe. We also have 2.4 mil test syringe in case you want to run your sample at very high shear rates. So I'm going to install this test syringe to the chip. So you will load your sample into this test syringe, and then you can easily tighten the test syringe to the inlet of the chip. So here is the whole system that you will need for your measurement. As you see, there is no tubing in between, so that can make everything easier, like cleaning. So you shouldn't be worried about the cleaning of the connection. So the only parts that you have to clean at the end of the experiment is reservoir, chip, and test syringe. So now I'm going to mount this system on the cold plate that has been designed here. So you see that the whole system can sit perfectly on the cold plate, and also the outlet of the reservoir should be connected to this tubing. So here's the reservoir, chip, and syringe. They all are set on the cold plate, and now we can close the cover. And as Stacy mentioned, we have everything under this cover. So here we have more stable temperature reading compared to m-VROC 1, since we have all the components inside this cover. So the temperature will be more stable and accurate. And here's the pusher block that when you start running your experiment, it moves toward the test range, and then there is some optical sensors here that can detect the head of the syringe, and the software will show you if it's engaged or disengaged. So this was some quick overview of the whole instrument, and now I'm gonna go over the software and share my screen with you to show the software. And I'm going to show you the new features that have been added to this instrument.
So, okay, just a quick comment. I had noticed someone was saying they couldn't see the screen. So while Soha was speaking, we were sharing the webcam, which we'll continue to share so you can still see the instrument. Hopefully, you can now see the software that she's going to be explaining. Let me just quickly check the comment section to see if that's a problem for others as well. Okay, so it looks like most people can see both the webcam and now the m-VROC 2 software. So I apologize to anyone who can't see it, but let's continue on.
Okay, thank you, Stacey. So here's the software, which is also with the added and advanced features that have been added to the instrument. So let's say that you have your sample loaded into the test range and you want to run your experiment. Now I'm going to show you the steps that you have to take to complete the measurement. So after you open the software, you will see the tabs in the left side of the software, the experiment, protocols, measure, and protocols, data, settings, and information. So the first step that you have to take is creating the measurement protocol. So for this purpose, I will go to protocol tab and measurement sub tab. Here you see the window, and here is where you can create your own measurement protocol. Basically, there are three ways that you can create the measurement protocol. The first approach is using the automatic mode. So as Stacey explained, if you have unknown sample, you can use automatic mode, and then you will be able to run your unknown sample. However, in our previous model in m-VROC 1, you have to have an initial guess to estimate the mean and maximum flow rate and run the shear sweep experiment. However, here you by just entering 0 as flow rate and 0 as measurement time and wait time, then the instrument takes care of your experiment, and it just run the experiment, the measurement automatically, and gives you an accurate value for the viscosity. So here is the measurement protocol I created with automatic mode. So I put 0, the first row is for the priming step, and the second row is for my measurement. So I just entered 0 as the flow rate, and then the number of repeats I want to have for my measurements is 5. And the measurement time and wait time is 0, and you also can set temperature, whatever you want. And after that, so that's the measurement protocol for automatic mode measurement. And if you have enough sample and you want to go back and do the shear sweep experiments and have the viscosity over a broader range of shear rates, you can take the viscosity value from the automatic mode measurement and go to range calculator here, and by entering the viscosity of your sample, you can determine the minimum and maximum flow rates. Actually, software determines this for you, and then after having this range, you can go back to the measurement protocol window here, and then enter your fixed rate and create a full range shear sweep experiments. So this is the kind of the second approach for creating the protocol, is based on your fixed rate. Actually, in this case, you know the viscosity of your sample and you can create your own measurement protocol. And the third approach is using level generator. So here we have level generator button. So I just click on this, and then I will put the I want to run my sample from 5% pressure full scale to 95% pressure full scale, and typically whatever levels you can put in here on the level column. So I will put 10. And then the temperature is 25, for example, and the number of repeats for each segment is 5. And if I append, it will create a measurement protocol for you in this by using level generator. The software uses and the firmware uses the priming step data to establish the flow rates corresponding to each percentage full scale. So these are typically 3 ways to create the measurement protocol. You also have some options here on top. You can see that you have to enter the retrieval volume. Retrieval volume actually depends on the loaded volume. The more sample you loaded into the test syringe, you can retrieve more. And also here you can choose the chip type, the syringe type, and pump type. After you double check all of this information, you can save your measurement protocol. And then, for example, I just put a random name. So here is the measurement protocol I created, and then that's it. That's the all the steps that you have to take to create the measurement protocol. You also are able to create the cleaning protocol, and the CCS, our CCS hardware can communicate with the software, with the m-VROC 2 software, and then you can easily clean the reservoir and chip automatically with the CCS. After creating the measurement and cleaning protocol, the next step would be checking the diagnostic test. So you will go to setting tab and utilities sub tab, and here you see diagnostic test. So here you can run chip test and leak test. So these are also new features that have been added to this product. So we don't have these features in our previous model. So when you exit this window, the next step would be just the final step for running the measurement. So you will go to experiment tab and design sub tab. So here you will see a nice GUI, the progress bar on the right. You can see the status and the duration of your measurement. Also the syringe bar displays shows you the real-time remaining volume of your sample, and also here you can enter the name of your sample. I just put test sample, and I can select the protocol that I've created here, and then by just then after you enter the name of your sample and choosing the right measurement protocol, you can hit the start button, and then the instrument starts running, and it will take care of your experiment. And also during the experiment, you can monitor data by going to data tab, and here there are 3 sub tabs. I will go to graph sub tab, and here 4 graphs are showing up. The first one is viscosity versus time, that shows you the transient curve for each segment during running your experiment. And then the second graph shows you the pressure versus sensor position. You also can see the temperature during your experiment, and also the last graph shows you the viscosity data versus segment number. For example, if you have shear sweep experiment, this segment number corresponds to the shear rate. So yeah, you can monitor your experiments during the running your experiment. So at the end of the measurement, you can easily export data. You have the option to export as Excel, CSV, and database. If you have Clarity, our Clarity software, you can export data as database, and then you can see and analyze data with the Clarity software. In case you don't have the Clarity, you still can export data as Excel and CSV and analyze data. And the final step would be the cleaning. So after you're done with your measurement, you can take out chip and reservoir and then put it on CCS and choose the right cleaning protocol, and the CCS would clean the reservoir and chip automatically for you. And the only part that you have to clean manually is test range. So you can choose the appropriate cleaning solvent to clean the test range. So that was sort of the background, the overview of the instrument. And now I'm going to turn it over again to my colleague Stacy, and she will go over some results that we collected with our m-VROC 2.
Okay, thank you, Soha. So now we're going to, let me actually just check the questions and see if there's any that we should address now or wait till the end. So I think we'll just keep going and address questions at the end. So now we're going to go back to the slides. And so hopefully from Soha's demonstration, you got a sense of how the ease of use with this system, how easy it is to assemble the syringe, the test syringe with the chip and the reservoir. And then not only that, but how much more advanced our software is. So it's much more similar to our automated instrument software, the Initium, where you can, no longer have to worry about guessing anything. You can do a fully automatic type test. And then once you're more familiar, you can start programming tests that are as elaborate as you would like. So with that in mind, we wanted to share some data that we've collected on our new instrument, focusing on a couple things. The first one is that new minimum sample volume of 15 microliters, just so you can get an idea of what type of data you can get with that limited volume. And the sample we chose to demonstrate for this is a model protein bovine gamma globulin at a high concentration level of 250 mg per mil. We chose this because it's our pharmaceutical customers that are so often concerned about sample volume, although this would apply to any industry where sample volume is limited. And so what we did here is we loaded 15 microliters into the syringe and then performed our test with the B05 chip. So the B05, if you're not familiar with our coding system, has a max pressure of 40 kilopascals and a channel depth of about 50 microns. And this is a pretty good universal chip, I would say, for pharmaceutical clients. So anyone new to our instruments, this would probably be a good starting point for you. Another simpler feature of our m-VROC 2 is we've sort of simplified things so that there are two syringe options, either a 100 microliter syringe or a 2.5 mil syringe. So for this tiny volume, we're using obviously the 100 microliter syringe. So this was loaded into the syringe. It was assembled as Soha described, and then we did two types of experiments for this. The first one was the automatic mode. So we said to the instrument, we don't know what the sample how it should behave. So help us out and choose a shear rate that is within the % full scale range of the chip. And so that is what happened here. And it shows a rate of slightly less than 900 inverse seconds. And so we can see the viscosity as a function of measurement number. We did 5 repeats for this experiment, and you can see the average viscosity that we obtained and the standard deviation, which is less than 0.04 centipoise, and the relative standard deviation, which is about 0.14%. So that's the kind of data we can get on this concentrated protein solution under automatic mode. And then once we knew what the viscosity was, as Soha described, you can then go in and create your own custom shear rate sweep. So then that was the second experiment we did with also 15 microliters of sample. And you can see that rate sweep that we obtained here and also compared with the auto mode data all averaged up. And so you can see that with only 15 microliters of sample, we can get a decade of shear rate from about 200 to maybe about 2,500 or so inverse seconds. So with just that 15 microliters, we can do either the automatic mode or we can actually get shear rate dependent data. So if you're wondering what happens once we go to higher rates, we'll talk about what happens with this type of sample when we get to higher rates in a moment. For that, we're going to need to include another chip to do testing at the higher rates because we're maxing out on % full scale pressure here. Okay, so let's talk about then, so just like any of our other instruments, this would be m-VROC, Microvisc, Initium, we can collect data on multiple chips to get the broadest range of shear rates that we possibly can for that particular sample. And so the first example of this is going to be for a couple of Newtonian fluids, so you can see how that looks, and then we'll share some more non-Newtonian fluids, which would be the model proteins in a moment. So now we're going to combine the BO5 chip, which we just described, and an EO5 chip. So again, for those of you who aren't familiar with our coding system, this has a much higher a much higher max pressure reading, 1700 kilopascals versus the 40 kilopascals in the B chip. But it also has a 50 micron channel depth. We again use the 100 microliter syringe for our B chip data collection. Although because we were going to the higher rates, we wanted more volume, so we used the 2.5 mil syringe for the E chip. And these are about the approximate volumes that were loaded, about 30 to 35 in the 100 microliter and 1 mil in the EO5 chip. Although these aren't the exact volumes you would absolutely need to use, these could be varied depending on what your actual availability is. So we have some examples here where we looked at both an N10, so this is a Canon mineral oil viscosity standard. So we have some data on this, which is slightly over 14, it's about 14.4 centipoise, and you can see how the BO5 data seamlessly connects with the EO5 data, and we get a very broad range of shear rates up to probably about maybe slightly between 300 and 400,000. And we would just to point out, since I'm talking about these Canon and 10 standard oils, it's always very important for you to test these periodically with your system so that you can be confident that your chip and instrument are performing properly. So these are always, I'll take a moment to make that statement so that you keep an eye on how your instrument is performing. The other Newtonian sample that we looked at with the two chips was a simulated human blood. So not real blood, just meant to mimic it in terms of viscosity and some other properties. And again, you can see that we have the data on the BO5 and the EO5. And in this instance, because it's a lower viscosity, somewhere between about 3.5 and 4, we can get up to even higher rates. In this case, it's about maybe between 5 and 600,000 inverse seconds. So that's some data on the two chips for Newtonian fluids. Now let's go back to our concentrated model protein solution, which is a gamma globulin. So now again, we're doing the almost identical experiments that we described on the previous slide with the BO5 and the EO5 using our two different syringe types that we have available for the system. But now we're looking at a situation where we do have a material that shear thins. So it's non-Newtonian, which means it's shear rate dependent. The viscosity has a dependence on shear rate. And this particular behavior is what we refer to as shear thinning with a low shear Newtonian plateau. So for a range of shear rates, probably a couple decades of shear rates here up to around maybe 2,000 or 3,000, we have essentially Newtonian behavior, but then there's sort of a critical shear rate beyond which we start seeing a reduction in the viscosity with shear rate. And this is what we refer to as shear thinning. So you can then use multiple chips to identify very clearly that low shear plateau and then the shear thinning regime of your material. So with that, I think we're going to stop there and take any questions that may have come in during this time. Okay, so let's do some of the quick ones first. So if someone's asking about the footprint of the instrument, I would say it's less than 1 foot by 1.5 feet, and that's probably being a little bit of an overestimate. I'm sure if you contact your sales rep, they could give you the exact number there, but it's roughly about 1 by 1.5 feet. And then as one of the other benefits that I'll mention in terms of the footprint is this one does not, we no longer need the circulating fluid bath, which is quite a monstrosity if you're familiar with it. So you don't have to worry about making space for that. And the chip cleaning station is probably maybe about 8 inches by 8 inches, give or take. So it's even smaller still. So there's a question about a barcode scanner. And yes, there is a barcode scanner. So I don't know if maybe you could point to it. So I think our webcam is still live. So it's right here. Yeah, so that's where you, if you have that on your samples, and that's how you keep track of your sample information, you would be able to scan them in before doing your testing. Okay. So let's see some of the other more involved questions. So there's a question about, is there an ASTM method associated with this instrument? And there is not at this time. You know, generally we can't create those on our own. We would need an industrial collaborator who would, you know, help us lead that process, you know, because we would need that collaborator who's an expert in that field to, you know, demonstrate the need there. So at this time, the answer to that would be no. So we have a question, some more questions. Does the protocol setup allow the user to select specific rate values to run versus using flow rate values? Yes, so you can do it either by looking at flow rate or shear rate, whichever way you're more comfortable with. So maybe we can, we should still be sharing our screen. Let's go ahead and go back to the software real quick. Protocols, measurement. Let's see. Okay, so it looks like everyone can see the software again. So if you go into the protocol tab where you create the measurement, there's this rate type here. And so you can pick either flow rate or shear rate. So whichever you're more comfortable with, you can go ahead and create your protocols accordingly. Okay, so then there's a question about how high of a shear rate can be measured using a 15 microliter sample. So I think we know based on, that's going to depend a little bit on the viscosity of the sample. So there are two things that are going to limit the max shear rate. One is the volume of the sample, that's true. One is the volume of the syringe you're using, and then one is the viscosity of that sample, and then also the chip you're using. I don't have a very clear answer for that. We might be able to follow up with you on that one, because there's a lot of factors there. So we know that for our particular sample that we demonstrated with the concentrated protein solution, which was about 27 or 28 centipoise, we got up to 2,500 inverse seconds. But if you had a lower viscosity sample, you could get higher. So there's a lot of moving parts there, so I don't want to commit to one. But if you want to follow up with us on that, maybe sharing a little more information about your sample, then we could probably give you a more specific answer. Okay, so does the retrieval process, the shearing that occurs during the retrieval process, damage the sample? So retrieval actually tends to, that's a tricky question. So if your sample is sensitive to shear, then of course there's the potential that the experiment as a whole could influence your sample in some way. Either, you know, yeah, I'm not sure exactly, you know, what could happen under shear. It entirely depends on your sample. You could have breaking down of a network structure, or if you had very high molecular weight macromolecules, then you could actually have some kind of degradation. But there's no more damage that's going to be caused by retrieval than, you know, that could be caused by the experiment itself. So that's, you know, if your sample is shear sensitive, then it's going to be sensitive to the experiment as a whole. And I'll just point out that, you know, by the nature of the test, we have to apply some sort of, there is an externally applied deformation. That's the nature of viscosity, it's the nature of rheology. So any viscosity measurement will have, you know, that similar concern. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so just, okay, so when do you suggest using an A chip instead of a B chip? Are A chips more sensitive at the low viscosity range than B chips? So yes, So the difference between an A chip and a B chip is that max pressure that you can reach without overpressuring. So for an A chip, it's about 10 to 12 kilopascals, and a B chip, it's about 40 to 42 kilopascals. So if you are dealing with very low viscosity fluids, then yes, the A chip would perhaps be your better option for that reason. We have a question, does the software work in Windows 11? I think I'd have to double check on that one, as I don't pay too much attention to that. We're more on the R&D side, and I get our software guys to help us with that. So I think, but I can't say with 100% certainty. Do the chips for the m-VROC2 have the same or approximately the same shear rate ranges as the corresponding chips for the m-VROC1? Example, BO5 for m-VROC2 and BO5 for m-VROC1. The answer is no, and the reason for that, and so sorry to keep jumping around, but let's go back real quick to, I'm still sharing the screen. So let's go back to PowerPoint. And so one of the differences between the new and the old instrument is the max flow rate that we have. So we've increased the max flow rate on either pump option from m-VROC1 to m-VROC2. And if we go then back to sort of how we calculate shear rates, so the max or the theoretical operational range of the shear rates depends on that flow rate in addition to the geometry of the channel. So because we've increased the max flow rate, which is represented here by Q, now we've increased the maximum shear rate in that theoretical range. So the shear rate range should be expanded for all chips from m-VROC1 to m-VROC2 because of that change in pump, which gives us the higher flow rate possibility. Now, bear in mind that depending on the viscosity of your sample, you may not be able to achieve the full theoretical range without overpressuring. So just bear that in mind. Okay, let's see. Okay, so then there's a question about how long will you support m-VROC1 for parts, etc. How long does it take to achieve the target temperature? So in terms of parts for m-VROC1, I think they're talking about 7 years there, although if you are currently an m-VROC1 user, you should check with your sales rep and get that exact number, but I think that's customary to keep supporting instruments for about that period of time, 7 years or so. And then how long does it take to achieve the target temperature on this? So now it's the Peltier. So Soha, have you paid attention during your measurements about how long?
It's less than maybe 2 to 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Yeah,
okay.
It's very fast compared to m-VROC1.
Okay, yeah, so 2 or 3 minutes. So that's mainly operating though, sort of close to the room temperature. Probably a little longer if you want to go all the way to 70 or all the way down to 4. So most of our experiments thus far, as you saw with the data, were close to room temperature, so about 25 C. So let's see. Okay, so then does the system have an audit trail, a user management system with individual accounts and user rights? How is the data stored, or does it always have to be exported? If the data is stored, is there a backup solution? Can the scanner also read QR codes? Okay, so I do believe there is an audit trail which is related to that 21 CFR compliance with the software, although I'm not terribly well versed in that particular topic, so I won't say more than that. I do also believe that you can have multiple accounts so that with different rights, so you could have admin rights or just perhaps testing rights, and I think rights also to modify protocols and things of that sort. I think that comes along with the 21 CFR compliance. So my understanding in terms of the data being stored, so it's sort of similar to our Initium software, where we have a database that the data is constantly there, and to actually utilize it, so it's always there, but to actually utilize it, you have to export it into either the database file, which we can open with our analysis software, or something like an Excel file. So the data is constantly stored, but to utilize it, you have to export it, so it doesn't go anywhere. So it's so long as you're backing up the computer or the server on which your database is stored, then you should be fine. And so my understanding is, yes, the scanner can read QR codes. Okay. So on the original m-VROC, the instrument was able to read automatically what type of chip is attached. Can the m-VROC 2 do this also? Looks like the chip type is entered manually in the software. No, so just like all of our instruments, when you insert the chip, it automatically knows what chip you have and its serial number. So what you're thinking of in terms of manually selecting chip, that's related to creating the protocol. So if you want to create, individual protocols for your A chips versus your E chips, for example, then that's just something you select in the instrument software. It's not something you have. So that's when you manually select chip type, is for creating measurement protocols that you might want to be specific to those. But the instrument recognizes your chip and its serial number just like the other instruments do. Okay, so I'm interested in linear and nonlinear measurement of low viscosity samples. So these, the question is referring to water-like samples. So that's 1 centipoise or so, using very small sample volumes, 15 microliters. I would like to know the highest shear rates that could be measured using the device, which would be the best chip setup and the syringe volume. So in this instance, because it's quite low viscosity, yeah, I think we'd have to, I don't think I can give you a definitive answer. I'd have to sort of do some calculations, because as I mentioned, when addressing another attendee's questions, there's multiple factors that go into the max shear rate that you can achieve. So obviously, when you move down to that lower viscosity, you're not so much worried about overpressuring the chip, but you have to be concerned about how much volume you actually have. So that's something that we have to sort of come back to you on after doing some calculations to see exactly what that max rate would be. Generally, though, you would still need to use a, beyond an A chip to get to these max rates, and potentially a narrower channel or smaller channel depth. So we have a question, what is the typical lifetime of chips? Do they degrade with normal wear and tear? So the typical lifetime is somewhat variable. If you do a very good job of keeping it clean and not overpressuring excessively, as the software has a safeguard to prevent you from fully overpressuring the chip. But so long as you don't keep it clean and don't overpressure, then chips can last for years. We have some chips in our lab from 6+ years ago for our other instruments. However, that may be sort of good luck in addition to keeping things clean. I would say that we would expect them to last at least a few years if you handle them well and keep them clean. However, they could last longer, 6+ in some instances. Okay, so someone's asking about the price estimate for this instrument. So I'm going to direct you to your local sales rep, as I'm not, Soha and I are in the R&D side, so we don't provide quotes. So you'd get the best info from your sales rep. So then there's a question here. Since the syringe is not jacketed for temperature, does this have any negative effect on measurements above or below room temperature? So actually it is jacketed. So I don't know, Soha, maybe you could, hopefully you can still see the webcam. So Soha's gonna pop the top there. So the whole composite, which is the syringe, the chip, and the reservoir, seat into that position there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you close the cover, so everything in temperature is under control, and when you have temperature control on and you set up the temperature of your experiment at 25 degrees C, it will the temperature would be stable at room temperature 25 degrees C, and then I think you shouldn't be worried about the temperature and the variation of temperature.
Yeah, so yeah, sorry that wasn't clear, but yeah, the whole composite syringe, chip, reservoir are enclosed in that Peltier temperature control area. So it is actually jacketed with the rest of the composite to have temperature control. Okay, let's see if we have anything else coming in. Okay, yeah, so the confusion, I guess, came from our animation we had in the slide, but that was sort of intentionally without the cover on it so that you could see the parts and how they are connected. So yeah, the animation was sort of intentionally removing that. Okay, so with both syringes, will both syringes use the same temperature jacket, or will you need to change them depending on syringe size, like the old m-VROC? So it's actually a much easier swap. It's basically just a, I'll call it an adapter that can be popped in and out of that seated area there. So Soha's over there, and basically it's just this adapter. So you need that with the 100 microliter, and then you don't need anything with the 2.5 mil. So it's a very simple part that pops in and out. I think it's magnetic, so it's kind of forced to sit properly. But you know, as I mentioned earlier, Soha also probably mentioned, we've simplified things to the 2 syringes and then this very simple, what I'll call adapter to handle the 100 microliter.
So yeah, I'm just adding this. So when you are using the 100 microliter syringe, you have to have this adapter underneath the syringe. So this magnet is acts something like detector. So the software, when you use this, the software can automatically recognize the type of the syringe. So for 100 microliter syringe, you have to use this, and then the software can recognize the syringe as 100 microliter syringe. For 2.5 mil, you don't need to use this part. So
okay, yeah, so good point. So just like the instrument recognizes what chip you've introduced into the system, because of that adapter, as Soha said, it will also know which syringe you're using. Okay. So we'll wait a couple more minutes and see if anything else comes in. But thank you for just while we're waiting, I just want to thank you again for joining us today. And if you want to, take a look at this again, we always send out the recording to anyone who signed up, even if you weren't able to attend. So, and again, please reach out to your sales rep if you're interested in something like a quote, which we can't provide. Okay, so, okay. Guess we're getting a couple more questions. Okay, is the chip connected to the instrument with a data cable like the old one, or is data transmitted wirelessly?
no, actually.
So it's not wireless. I'm not sure if you want to just pull the chip up, so the whole thing. There is a connection, but you no longer have to fidget with that cord and make sure that that's sort of seated properly. So it kind of just, as it sits into that base, it automatically connects. So it's not wireless, it does connect, but the cable aspect of it is gone. So hopefully you could see Soha had the chip there. Okay, and then the question is about how long does it take to clean on the chip cleaning station? So I'll
say it's 10 minutes. Yes, not that much long.
So was that for buffer cleaning?
Yeah, for buffer.
Okay, so for something like buffer cleaning, if you're familiar with that, so that's typically what we recommend when you're dealing with proteins, antibodies, and we'll typically use 3 solvents. So that would be a primary, which would be buffer solution, or buffer solution, and then an aqueous soap solution, and then a enhancer, something like acetone or IPA. For the sample so far, about 10 minutes or so. However, of course, if you have something that can vary. It could be slightly slower if you're dealing with something where you can clean with, say, an enhancer only. So if you're dealing with organic solvent-based systems where you can, clean with like a chloroform or an acetone, those are much faster. And of course, if it's a more tricky sample where you need to, flush and soak, then it could be longer. But for the data we showed you today, about 10 minutes or so. But bear in mind that could change. Okay, so I think we're coming at the end of the time, and hopefully we've got all of the questions that you were asking. So again, thanks for joining us. And for some of those things where it was a little hard to give a definitive answer because we might need to know a little bit more about your sample and what you're trying to achieve, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to discuss that with you and clarify that. So thanks again, and have a good day.